In this last video about the labor market, we're going to talk about what will cause equilibrium to change. Okay, and so the basic answer is going to be an external shock to supply or demand. So something besides the wage that affects supply or demand. That's basically the answer. So remember that since demand is derived, the market for goods and services really matters. So demand is derived, meaning you're not hiring people because you want to hire them. You're hiring them in order to make something that then you can earn money doing. So demand is derived from the product market. So it depends on the market for the good or service you're producing, and the production technology is also really important. So if you have a big change to the good or service market that you're producing for, or you have a big change in you have a big change in your production technology, this is going to affect the labor market, but it's affecting it sort of indirectly. It's also related to changes in related labor markets and changes within the household. So the supply will depend on these things, the related labor markets. So supply, let me just replace the also with supply. It's related to change in the related labor markets and change within the household. So in a couple of weeks, we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about what kind of changes in the household can then affect the supply of labor. But that's for the future. So okay, so let's just do two examples of this. So let's do two examples of an application of these things. Okay, so we have to first define a specific market. And so our market is going to be for construction workers, just to pick something. And we'll come back later and do more examples that are directly related to this course. So we had our demand for construction workers, we had our supply of construction workers, and we have a current equilibrium. We can call this L star. And our current equilibrium wage, call them both L star 0, W star 0. Okay, so now this is an equilibrium. We're cruising along, and then something happens. So let's say what happens is a housing boom. So we get a big increase in housing, which leads to a lot of construction. So this increases demand for construction workers. So some kind of economic activity can have a big effect on a specific labor market, so for construction workers. Okay, so that has that effect. And then now in this case, both our wages went up and the number of construction workers also went up, right? So we end up with higher wages and more people working, okay, in this industry. So we got higher wages and more people working in the industry. Okay, the second one, so that's our first example, and this could have been something else. So this could have been something to do with educators or computer programmers or anything else, right? But some kind of boom in the market for the good or service they're producing then causes an increase in demand for workers of that type. The same could then happen on the side of some kind of crash, would then cause a decrease in demand for that type of worker. So, okay, now we're going to look at one that's on the supply side. So let's make our labor market be retail workers. So people who work in retail sales, right? Retail sales workers. Okay, and so we start off with some wage and some labor. We have our demand and our supply. Okay, so this is where we're starting off at. And then we're going to have some change happen. So let's suppose there's some other growing fields that need workers of this type. Okay, so I think I would guess typically people in retail sales are often younger, although not always, and high school graduates, but generally not always college graduates. So that's kind of what I'm assuming. So this is kind of like a medium skill, medium education group. So we got increased opportunities in other fields. For some reason, some other part of the economy is growing with same education requirements. So similar type of education background, they're growing. So, well, you're going to have some of the workers they're going to say, well, I want to leave this. There's these other opportunities other places. So you're going to see a decrease in the supply. Remember, the decrease happens horizontally. And then if nothing else changed, so the business climate in this area didn't change, this would lead to less people working in retail, but it would expect to raise the wages. So they get less workers, and so the final result is less workers, but higher wages. Okay. So these are just two examples to try to review the basics of supply and demand, while at the same time teaching you about the labor market if you haven't seen it before. I would suggest you also take a look at the appendix, and then in this week's activities somewhere there'll be a little bit more chance for you to practice. So hopefully this made sense. Please go ahead and ask me any questions that you have.